What is up, everybody? Welcome to the first episode of a new series called Gentlemen of the Corax, where it's basically just a group of friends talking about shark-related subjects. Let's quickly introduce ourselves. My name is Ben Goode, and I'm the owner of OnPointFossils.com and the host of Elasmocast. Chase, why don't you quickly introduce yourself?
Oh, hi everybody. My name is Chase Egli, and I am a graduate student at the University of Alabama. I have a bachelor's of science in geology from the University of Alabama as well. Says me. I study sharks.
My name's Kyle. I run NJ Fossils on Instagram and YouTube, and I'm a geology slash paleontology graduate from Rowan University. And I primarily do geochemistry of vertebrate fossils, so not as much sharks, but sharks are more like a hobby.
So, what the rundown is going to look like for this is we're going to be talking about in this episode the winners and the losers of the shark world. And let me ask you guys, do you want us to also be able to include shark relatives, or do we just want to keep this strictly sharks?
We can include shark relatives.
Yeah, we include shark relatives. I think that's a good idea.
Give the
Okay.
ratfish some love.
Yeah, I think we should start there.
You want
Yeah,
to?
they never get love. Most unloved Chondrichthyan ever.
Yeah.
I love them. I think they're so cool.
They are cool. I think it's a win when you're in the Paleozoic, where it's apparently notoriously difficult to find Chondrichthyan material, and you can like throw a rock and hit a Deltoides or hit another
Yeah.
like cochleodont. So I consider that a win. They were thriving, no
Yeah, I think
shortage of
anytime
food.
we get like the general body plan and mode of life right 300 to 400 million years ago, and it's still pretty much working for you, like that's a win.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's
And
also a win
oh, you
when it's like such a primitive, time for sharks. They'd only been around for not very long, and then they're like stingray looking things like Janassa and these giant like pancake looking vertical pancake looking things and like Physodopsis and Balancy and stuff like that. So I think when you start testing the waters, that's a W. You're thriving.
hmm And I would say in the Paleozoic, a big winner would have been Cyvodus, just being able to reach these gargantuan sizes well back into the Paleozoic. Like this is hundreds and hundreds of million years before you had things like great whites. Yet this thing was just monstrous.
I guess it's kind of a win, but it could be kind of a loss when you look at how they evolve. Because like into the Pennsylvanian and Permian, they become essentially like a microtaxon. And so that's kind of like, they win in the Mississippian, but then something happens and they're like, oh God, never mind, run it back. So yeah, there's a case for both, I think.
Yeah. And that's another thing. We can consider winning and losing in a bunch of different um, terms. Like you can have one as a winner based on, say, distribution, but then it could lose in geological distribution where it doesn't last very long. We can talk, say, in extant animals about their current conservation status as whether it's a winner or a loser. There is a whole bunch of different criteria that we could make for something, and they can, sometimes be contradictory whether it's a winner or a loser, depending on how you look at it.
That's fair.
Yeah, I agree. We can't really consider broad spectrum winners and losers just because of the amount of time we're covering and how diverse the group is that we're covering.
And I would definitely
And
say the Claudodonts as a whole, the Claudodontomorph tooth design was a winner because it evolved in the Devonian. And then you see that tooth design. Granted, there's a lot of debate as far as the taxonomy and the classification of the Claudodonts, where they're placed within each other. But you see Cretaceous ones in France being found there. So I would definitely call those a winner.
I could get behind that. I mean, especially with some of these different tooth designs of the kind of cladodont morphology, it's very clear that some of them were like in the essentially the higher, if not highest niche of that time. Um, especially what is it, Cladotus mirabilis, especially that one. Those are pretty hefty. So
Yeah. Glickmanius got pretty big too.
that's true. Glickmanius and Glickmanius survives through what I think to the Permian, right? Yeah. And yeah, they do pretty good too. They're pretty common around here in Alabama. So.
What do you think would be the losers in the Paleozoic?
Mm, I don't know. I have a hot take.
Let's hear it.
I think the hot take is I think some of the eugenodonts are losers because they get so wacky that they can't really survive too well. And so they don't last very long. Like Helicoprion or Adestus. I think they're a winner in some aspects. But the hot take is they lose in the overall scheme of life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Like, I almost feel like there should be a winner category for boldest path of evolution. Like, when
Mm-hmm.
you look at it and just think, how could that have possibly worked?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that can win in that regard, maybe. But when you see something that never even comes close to happening through evolution again, you know it was a pretty bad path the first time. In a
Mm-hmm.
world where like convergent evolution just completely dominates like tooth morphology, if something's successful, we should be seeing it again. If
Mm-hmm.
we're not over hundreds of millions of years, something went really wrong the first time.
Yeah.
Ain't that the truth? I
The
don't.
uniforms really had some of the weirdest um anatomical designs out of really any Chondrichthyan. As you said, you have Helicoprion and you have Adestus, but the order as a whole, the Eugenodontiforms, really um kind of gets demolished in the end Permian mass extinction, with only a little bit of them residing in the Triassic before completely disappearing in the fossil record. So if
Sucks
we
to suck.
the end Permian mass extinction was really the death bringer for most of the Euchondrocephalans, which are the ratfish and kin. And then you really only see the chimera forms that are still around today after that point.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've got to give props to anything that survived the end Permian, no matter how short it may have been, surviving that extinction event, because that was just like if you're able to survive that in any capacity for any amount of time, that's an impressive feat, even if it like ultimately you go extinct soon after.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair.
And speaking of the end Permian mass extinction, going to the true sharks, I think that Synecodus has to be included on one of the biggest winners within the shark
Mm-hmm.
world, because we find early Permian age Synecodus teeth from Russia, meaning that not only did this shark evolve in the Paleozoic, but you see Synecodus teeth all the way into Paleogene, which is an insane
That's yeah,
period of time.
For an
yeah,
animal evolving that close to the Permian Triassic extinction and it just tanking it and just continuing, that is really impressive.
yeah,
That's a dub.
And there's
yeah.
debate as to within Synecdoche what is actually Synecdoche and what would be paraphyletic or even polyphyletic. So Synecdoche antiquus, which is that Permian Synecdoche, it might not be a true Synecdoche, but regardless, again, that range just mind-boggling.
That's fair. We can give them a dub, give them a medal,
Yeah.
an award. I did think of a criteria for being a loser in the Chondrichthyan world, and it's if you have to go to deep water to survive. So the ratfish, that's an L. That's an L.
I
You have the
don't think so. I don't.
Mitsucorinids. That's an L.
Any sort of survival is pretty cool, especially like if you're able to take a body plan that was originally shallow marine and like I mean, over millions of years, obviously, but you just go deeper and deeper and deeper until no one ever sees you again. But you're there, like grubbing around on the bottom of the ocean. I think that's a win. I'll disagree there.
Where lots of species are becoming endangered from overfishing, a lot of the deep sea environments act as sort of a refuge for those animals, which would be a big win.
I don't know. It just feels like a cop out, you know? It feels like, look, I have my card. It's the go deep into the ocean and never be seen again card that's been pulled by the ratfish, the goblin sharks, the kind of the six skills a little bit. I
Yeah,
don't know
I
about the
think the
Greenland
go
shark.
into deep water card is better than the guess I'll just die card.
That's fair, I guess. I'll just
That's just
die.
my line of thinking.
Yeah, I'm sure that these sharks need to apologize to you, Chase, for finding their own ecological niche.
Yeah.
Bad
Just
environment.
ecological cop out.
And you also have to consider how long they've been around before going into those environments.
That's true. I can get behind that.
Yeah.
Panrhynchus.
Yeah, I would
Whatever
say
happens.
the Carinids would be a winner overall because you've had, well, one, Scapanorhynchus was one of the top dogs in the Cretaceous for sharks. And then you still have extant relatives, the goblin sharks. And yeah, they're in your deep sea environments, Chase, but I think that they're holding on pretty well.
I think they're holding on pretty well too. I just looked it up. They're of least concern. So they're one of like the only lamniforms that's of least concern.
Yeah,
Can't say that about the great whites.
No, great whites are going to be the losers here in a little bit. Give it a few
yeah. I
million.
mean, from an overall geologic time perspective, like I know we said we had to have different criteria for all the different taxon, but I think great whites just aren't around long enough geologically to like treat them with any sort of not to not treat them with respect. I mean, they're like an apex predator, which is pretty awesome for today's modern oceans. But at the
Mm,
same time, like you look at some of the lengths that these other like apex sharks were able to last, and it just blows what the great white has done out of the water.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the great whites, like you said, they haven't been around for very long. And I suspect that they're gonna go kind of the route that a lot of the lamniforms have went when they started serrating. So, for example, Paleocarcharodon, they're not around super long before becoming extinct. I would consider Paleocarcharodon one of the biggest losers of the shark world because they became really bold and just started to get these crazy serrations, and then they just die.
Yeah. I wonder why that is. I feel like it would open up like a different avenue of a diet for them. Like it would give them more options,
I
but
suspect that they evolved too soon for their own good because they didn't have the same mammal populations that are around right now. So
that's true. Because they were earlier Paleocene, right? Like early to mid Paleocene.
yeah, they were a Paleocene shark, which means
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
you didn't have the whales and all of that stuff that the serrations really benefit on. They didn't have
Yeah.
back then, which you see the great whites consuming a lot of with their serrations.
And they also didn't have any like marine reptiles to fill that void either. It was sort of a weird kind of blank spot in time for the like non-shark macrofauna,
Hmm.
which is like it's a cool snapshot, but like it really just stinks for Paleocarcharodon that it like I just wonder what was the catalyst to develop serrations if there really don't seem to be many prey animals that would require them.
It might have,
They must have been a turtle muncher.
yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
have tried filling an ecological niche that that was left over from not having your mosasaurs, your Corax, some of the other larger sharks, but they probably also got outcompeted by Ototus.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
That's true. They get done
Speaking
did.
of Ototus, I think it's impossible to call them anything other than a winner. They're absolutely everywhere for a pretty long time.
Hmm. They have
And
a
then like we have such an extensive record of that lineage that we know they didn't go extinct. They just turned into something else that turned into something else. Like I
yeah.
think that's a win just for the whole lineage.
I think you could make the argument. This is going to be another hot take. I think you can make the argument that Megalodon was a loser because it didn't live up to what its ancestors did.
I think that could be a fair point because you can't say that there aren't whales anymore. Like there are whales to eat. There may not have been as many, like it could have required too much food, possibly. I'm not really sure. I'm sure you guys know more about that than I do, but like anything outside of the Cretaceous, I start to kind of lose where I'm at.
Can't deny that Cretalamna, which gave rise to Ototus and the Megalodon lineage, is one of the biggest winners, being around
Yeah,
early Cretaceous all the way through into the Paleogene. And then if you look at it monophyletically, going all the way down to like Paratotus benetoni, that's crazy. Because
yeah,
Ototus lineage, and you have monsters like Carcaracles. Then you also have monsters like Paratotus that also evolved and were probably competing with each other, at least to some degree. Granted, Paratotus had non-serrated hook teeth, meaning they were probably consuming more fish, but still
yeah,
3-inch plus Paratotus teeth.
yeah.
Crazy. And I would call Paratotus a winner because they were the last otodontid that was around before that family becoming extinct.
It makes me wonder, what do we do with Megalolamna? Is that a winner or a loser? I don't know. It's kind of a wild card.
It is. We don't really know because their fossil record is so scarce. We really only see them appearing in the late Oligocene through the Miocene without really much else. And then I don't even think that there's much described from the late Oligocene. This is just stuff that we see as fossil collectors.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think like we may be unfairly judging like the great white because like it's not its fault that it only evolved recently. Like we have no idea what its story is going to end up being. Like we know it's vulnerable now, but we also don't know like how many times did shark populations kind of take a hit in like I don't know, some random time, the Eocene. Like some random group of very successful sharks, maybe they really dwindled and then came back. Like, but those sort of fine-tuned like 100 year, 1,000 year type scales can't really be seen in the geologic record. So I don't know if it's fair to like punish a taxon just because it only evolved recently and is a modern species.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, you're a loser when your liver's getting eaten by a glorified dolphin.
It's hard to argue with that.
Though there's some whale enthusiasts that are gonna be knocking on my door now.
Yeah. David's gonna come find you.
Yeah, he is.
Omniforms as a whole are kind of in the loser bracket right now.
That's
The
true.
Carcharinus, I think, is the biggest or one of the biggest winners. Well, yeah, you have some vulnerable species in there. As a whole, that family, the Carcharinids, they've really kind of taken the place of Squalocorax in the Cretaceous as being the modern equivalent that are just pure generalists that can
Yeah.
really whatever role they need to in order to survive. And I would say that one of the biggest winners would be the bull shark
Oh
because
yeah, I was just about to say that.
yeah, they're able to inhabit all these different environments. They're one of the top dogs in the shark world, and they're able to basically eat anything.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
I think they're like an undisputed winner. Like they
Mhm.
I don't see anything really causing them too much trouble as far as like survival wise because they can eat anything and inhabit almost anywhere.
Yeah, outside of people, we've kind of been
Yeah.
issue for sharks.
Yeah. Outside of human influence.
And I would say that with human influence on shark populations, probably, in my opinion, this will be very controversial, but the biggest winner in the shark world is, drumroll, Heterodontus. Granted, they didn't obtain these monstrous sizes like the whale shark or megalodon, and they've basically kept their one ecological niche. They really haven't changed all that much since their relatives in the Jurassic, and they're within least concern or data deficient for basically all of their species. In the I don't know, I feel like they're the biggest winners. They're like the Giga Chads of the shark world. Humans will before the Heterodontists become extinct.
I feel like that's fair. I don't know about humans going extinct before Heterodon. Well, maybe. Now that you think about it.
I mean, will there be crabs and other little mud inhabiting fauna?
That's true.
If so, then I think Heterodontus will be okay.
Valid.
I was gonna say, I think like we'd have to call like the dogfish like Squalus. I think that has to be a winner. Like
Mhm.
they are just everywhere. You can't try to catch anything in the ocean without getting a dogfish as bycatch. Like they're everywhere. I think they would have to be a winner.
I would say that the dogfish are like the squalomorph equivalent to the Carcharinus within the gallimiorphs, because you have such high diversity within Squalus species.
Yeah.
And again, they're abundant. They've kind of kept most of their ecological niches the same. Granted, you have some squaliforms that got massive, like the Greenland shark. But yeah, I would say that the Greenland shark was one of the biggest winners, considering they've managed to be the longest living known vertebrate alive today. There are some specimens that are, approaching 400 years old. I think that's a W.
Yeah, I would say that's a win.
So
Yeah.
there is, however, maybe a little loss in there when you have parasites that make you go blind, in your eyes. I don't know.
I guess
But
that's true. But
small
also, if
price.
you're able to survive and you don't even need your eyes.
Yeah.
That's fair.
That's a sign of resiliency, I think.
Yeah.
Small price to pay
They're
for
not victims,
salvation.
they're survivors.
Survivors. Oh, man, who else? We could jump back to the Cretaceous. Discuss
With
them.
your favorite.
Yeah, I think the biggest winner of all time, maybe even, is
Big claim.
Corax.
It's a big claim.
I don't need to back it up. It's
I mean,
simply
we
a
all
fact.
are the gentlemen of the Corax.
That's
Yeah.
true. The sky is blue. Corax reigns king. I mean,
So what did Corax do that Carcharinus hasn't?
Mosasaurus?
Yeah, kill Mosasaurus. That's a valid point.
You just haven't had the chance, okay? Give them a break.
There are monitor lizards. Same difference, kinda.
There has to be one bull shark at some point that has killed some monitor lizard.
Probably some 4-foot little monitor. They didn't eat a 20-foot, Mosasaurus.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Squalicorax probably didn't either unless it was dead first.
That's true. That's fair. I don't know. Maybe they were hunted like great whites and would like send a 20-foot mosasaur out of the water somehow, destroy physics.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
Squalocorax
like
really didn't get that big outside of your end Maastrichtian Moroccan ones.
But they're so prolific. That's
yeah,
the
like I
thing.
would say they're definitely a winner. Like, and as big a Squalicorax fan as anybody, but I don't know if you could call them the biggest winners of all time when they have the perfect body plan and mode of life to survive an extinction event, and they don't.
That's
Yeah.
fair. That's fair. Maybe my Corax envy was a little too high, I
Yeah,
guess.
like
I'll
I
concede.
I love Corax. He's definitely a winner, but
Hmm.
biggest winner of all time, and you couldn't even do what you were designed to do, which is just be a generalist and survive like turbulent conditions.
Well,
That's
Corax, they were hyper successful in the Cretaceous. I don't think there's
Yeah.
any denying that. They have a cosmopolitan distribution, meaning they're around worldwide. They're super common in the fossil record. And if you look at Corax monophyletically or as a clade, then you have multiple different ecological niches that they evolved into. Like you have Corax, which started getting crushing teeth in their posterior sections, which was insane. I mean, you see that with the modern Spirna tiburo, which is pretty cool that there's
like
parallels there. You
Corax walked, so Spearna Tibero could run. That's all I'm saying.
Spirna tiburo definitely copied Corax's notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you also had things like Skinner Corax and these other really small anacracids that, in my opinion, evolved from Corax. So they evolved that type of really small shark niche as well. And they were really the carcharinids of the day ecologically.
Yeah, like they they had such a broad range of like I guess you can't say such a broad range of sizes, but like a broad range of sizes. There were some really small ones that would like fill that smaller carcharinid type role, and the larger ones that would fill that like not quite apex predator, but pretty high up there on the trophic level
Mm.
list. And also just kind of be like garbage disposals for the ocean. Like every ecosystem needs one, and Squalicorax was a really good one.
Hmm. Stepped up to the plate. I have a hot take. Another one. God help
Okay.
me. I think you could consider Pseudocorax a loser because they copied Squalicorax's notes and still died in the KPG.
Fair enough. And they weren't nearly as abundant or successful as Corax.
No, they failed.
Yeah, like
Simply put.
if you're living at the same time, like the same late Cretaceous time frame, and you're not being found in New Jersey, I say you're a loser.
Mhm. That's
Speaking of
fair.
losers, I would say that a lot of the lamniforms that serrated, we've already talked about Paleocarcharodon, but Alopius platosi is like one of the biggest failures in the shark
Yeah,
world because here
Mhm.
you had a shark that could have possibly taken the great whites niche and it was, on the way to that and then it just died.
yeah.
Flat out
It's
gave up.
that's such an interesting like pattern too. Like serrated sharks don't seem to do all that well from a like long-term perspective. Like you could argue like the Ototus lineage did the best.
And Squalocorax. Those two were
Yeah,
probably
yes,
the
that's
best.
well correct.
But yeah, you also have Carcharoides todusceratus, a complete failure when sand sharks started serrating. Clearly, the world didn't like that.
I know.
Why are you
And
doing that? Stop.
there's absolutely no reason for sand sharks to change any of what they're doing. That like they are so good at what they do.
Sand sharks are kind of losers too, if you look at it from the fact that after the KPG, they were rapidly diversifying. And then Carcharinus just came in there and said no and just took their
Yeah,
place.
and took all the roles. That's
Yeah.
true. That's a fair point.
Yeah, in the Paleocene and early Eocene, you had a ton of these different odontaspid sharks. Like you had Jackalatotus, Robustus. If you just look at
Mhm.
like the Moroccan fauna, for example, you had Hypatotus, you had your Odontaspis, you had just all of this monstrous diversity that took place, and then it just got wiped out, probably from Carcharinus taking a lot of their niches.
Yeah, what do we like? How do we treat those like sort of enigmatic deep water species or like open ocean species that just don't fossilize well? Like we can't be 100% certain as to how successful they were. Like they're super rare, but they could have been abundant, just
Mhm.
not in like high high rate of burial areas where their teeth would actually fossilize, like some of those more pelagic species.
That is a good point. You have things like the blue shark and the oceanic white tip as far as extant sharks that we really don't see much in the fossil record. At least they're very rare, and that's because of their pelagic lifestyle. Even though we
Yeah,
know that they were around back then, they're just not very common. And then the deep sea sharks, those are also very rare. You have to have really prime conditions to find those in the fossil record.
yeah. Like, do we have any like super deep water species preserved through the fossil record? Like, I mean, like the goblin shark's current lifestyle. Like, do we have those types of areas in any sort of like outcrops?
We do.
Hornby
It's
Island.
just really rare. You'd find
Yeah.
them in like France where there's some preservation of deep sea environments. So in those same sites, you would see a lot of the rare squaliforms. Like you'll see your centrophorus. You'd see just a bunch of the stuff that would currently live in the deep sea environments. But
Okay,
but again,
cool.
it's rare to find those sites. Most are in
Yeah.
Europe, from what I've seen.
Okay.
And there's British Columbia as well, Hornby Island.
Yeah, for the
Yeah.
Cretaceous stuff.
Yeah. So,
Mythocarina wouldn't be found in that site, but that's where you find things like the frill shark and
mhm.
their relatives. And we should talk about the frill shark too, because that's kind of a shark that was banished to the deep sea.
So
That's
do we know what
true.
Confucius
I'd say
was?
it's a morphological dub.
I think it's kind of a loser. I
Oh,
think that so in the Cretaceous, we see in like the Hornby Island site that they were incredibly diverse with multiple species of frill shark that were alive at that time. And you had some that were like great white size. And then now you just don't see that diversity. You have just the frill shark and the South African frill shark, and those are pretty similar to each other. Nowhere near the diversity that they were before.
Yeah.
sounds like the exact same thing that we called a winner for the goblin shark, in my opinion. But I don't know, man.
Well, Scapanorhynchus was far more successful, I feel like, than the Clumeator Selachoids. Granted, they're deep sea, so we don't know the whole story on them. And we don't know the whole story in any of these for that matter, but
Yeah.
they aren't nearly as prevalent in the fossil record as Scapanorhynchus was.
That's fair, I guess. Suppose. I was thinking earlier that another failure was definitely Tychodus, I think.
Jared's not
Simply
gonna like that.
simply because the oysters and the ammonites didn't disappear. They didn't disappear in the Campanian, but the Tychodus did. What happened?
Yeah, that
Their food's
like
right
Heterodontus,
there.
no? Heterodontus will outlive them all.
it sort of ends up being like a borderline personal vendetta for me because I want Tychodus to be in New Jersey's Cretaceous strata so badly, and it just isn't. And like there are so many shellfish and invertebrates for them to have been eating. Like it was like on a silver platter for them. Like you have just absolute beds of Exogyra and Pycnodoni and all these invertebrates that are so incredibly abundant that any shark that was an invertebrate like base diet should have been having the time of their life.
Mhm.
Mhm.
You
So
kind
I
of
will,
Yeah.
see mosasaurs like Lobodens taking that ecological niche.
yeah, but what's crazy is even like, I mean, this is just strictly New Jersey's Cretaceous, but like Globidens is uncommon. We don't find teeth from Globidens very often. So like what was the main predator of these things? Like there were too many. Something had to have been like fully eating them all the time. And like a lot of them had to have been around.
Mm-hmm.
Corax ate. That's how they evolved. They eat Moses. They eat globidins. That's it.
Yeah.
God, Kyle's a genius. I'm publishing.
I think I think we should talk about some of the rays and like skates of the world. I just
Let's
think
talk
they're
about
so
the saw
cool.
skates, like
Yeah.
True.
Ichthyorhiza.
I think we could call them a winner. They have just such a bizarre body plan that was able to succeed for like a pretty long time geologically.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Saw skates walked so sawfish and saw sharks could run. I mean, once again,
Also really diverse too throughout the Cretaceous. The saw.
Yeah,
and they're real funky too. Their teeth won a morphological award, a winner for
yeah.
being the most jacked up looking.
Like sometimes I see pictures and I feel like they almost look like a hybrid cross between like regular ray teeth and Tychodus like Whipple eye teeth.
I know.
You know what I
Like
mean? Like they have that weird like bulge at the top.
Mm-hmm.
Tychotrigon rugosum is like a miniature Tychodus. It's real weird.
Mm-hmm.
Real
Yeah,
messed up.
they're cool though. Like I'll fight for them. I'll call them a winner.
Yeah, they were
That's
Even
also
though
fair.
like
pretty abundant.
nowadays, like the modern sawfish is like so like close to being extinct. I'm still giving them a win just because like that body plan being able to last this long, even if it's not like direct lineages, and like there are sort of probably a lot of convergent stuff going on there. I think that body plan's still succeeding enough. They're alive now. Like I'll give them credit for that. I think saw skates, sawfish, saw sharks. I'm gonna call them a winner across the board.
That's
Yeah.
fair. I think if you're able to throw your face at something to kill it and eat it, that's a
Yeah,
W.
And there is something to be said about a trait like that, as bizarre as it is, evolving 3 different times at least.
yeah. Like it's gonna work eventually. It's gonna stick and become just like a dominant force, like some of those carcharinids are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
And
would
then
definitely call those that body plan as a win. And it's really fascinating how we initially thought that the saw skates were or the sclerorhynchoids. We thought that those evolved from guitarfish independently from the guitarfish that evolved in Eupristis, the modern day sawfish. But now we think that they are saw skates, meaning that this evolved independently 3 different times from completely different lineages.
yeah, like different lineages just converging on each other, like to a T morphologically, like pretty much identical.
Yeah, it's a fascinating body plan.
I was gonna say, I don't think it's like the benthic type species where their mouth just ends up on the bottom of their body. I think they're awesome. I just think that's such a cool way to evolve. Like all the food's down there. Why would I waste time having my mouth on the top when it could just be dragging across this buffet at all times? Like I think that's so cool.
Squatina also we have to consider a winner because of their
Yeah.
longevity and their commonality in the fossil record.
Yeah, I agree. I would agree with that.
I get
They
behind
really
it.
didn't change too much.
What about nurse sharks or like those some of those weird Cretaceous like nurse-like sharks?
I would probably consider them a winner. I think that they were pretty diverse, and we still have nurse sharks today to represent them. Yeah, the carpet sharks in general, I would probably call a winner. They're doing better um than the lamniforms are. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
that's a pretty
That's not
low
a high
bar.
bar though.
Yeah. Lamniforms are getting tanked right now.
Yeah. What would we say about the hybodonts? Like I just think any sort of shark that was considered primitive in the Cretaceous, like I think that's pretty cool.
I have mixed feelings on
Yeah.
those. They can be a winner in that the hybodonts have been around since the Devonian, and then they
Yeah,
go all the way to the Cretaceous. That's a massive time span. But then
yeah,
at the same time, by like the Jurassic, the true sharks kind of like took their place
yeah.
and
I think
left
I
them.
think I would still call them a winner just based off the longevity criteria. I think like you're spanning across the Permian mass extinction. You're getting to the finish line in the Cretaceous and just not really quite making it across it. But
Yeah.
I think that's a win. Even if you get completely bodied out of your original niche, like you still cling. They managed to hang on.
Yeah. By a thread, and then the KPG just wipes.
Yeah,
It's kind of sad though. They could have been like the thing. They could
I
have
know.
dominated over the true sharks, but they didn't, and they got left into these like freshwater environments, or they were in their other environments, but nowhere near at the same abundance rates. Like in New
Yeah,
Jersey, for example.
what was the max size of hybodonts like throughout the geologic record?
The max
Like
size?
they were pretty small, right?
That's a good question. Most were fairly small.
Because like, could you
Yeah.
imagine if things had gone differently and hybodonts outcompeted the true sharks, and we had like 25-foot apex predator hybodont sharks with like 2.5 foot long dorsal spines? Like,
Would have been,
Yeah. That would have
it
been
would have been
badass.
awesome.
yeah.
I want to live in that world.
Yeah. That's fair. I think we can also consider the Ray body plan as a win because I mean it
Yeah.
started back with like Janassa, which isn't even Ray, but you know that body plan just yeah, it's like when in Rome pancake, you know?
Yeah. Rays are a win. In like a broad to paint like with a broad brush, like just rays as a whole are a win. You have like gigantic freshwater species of ray, like saltwater species, like they're really cool.
I
Yeah.
think generally you're a winner if like one species of your family or order or whatever is like chilling in fresh water. That's
Yeah.
a win.
Speaking
Yeah,
of
I
which,
would,
though, I would call Glyphis a loser.
Yeah, yeah.
Is the
yeah, that kind of puts a fork in that line of thinking.
So
I
yeah,
don't know.
they were able to reach different um environments that most sharks haven't been able to, but I feel like they were completely outcompeted by the Carcharinus species, like especially the bull shark. They were just far more successful and managed to attain a cosmopolitan distribution, whereas Glyphis are far more isolated. And then also, if you factor in human intervention, you look at if you just do a Google search right now, looking up like modern oceanic whitetip or even maybe modern bull shark teeth, you'll see a lot of Glyphis teeth in there, which means that most likely some of these sharks are being caught in large numbers in marine environments, which we just don't know as much about, but they're clearly being killed in large enough numbers to have large supplies of their modern teeth on the market, even though their label is something else, which I think is a big loss.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so too.
I think Glyphis is like the bastard child of Carcharinids. In a way. I know that's a hot take. Jeremy Wade just sensed something wrong, but I don't know. Yeah, that's fair. A little wrench in
I
my
mean, if
idea.
it takes Jeremy Wade a long time before he can finally catch a Glyphis, then it's probably not a winner.
That's true. If there's
Yeah.
an episode of River Monsters, well, I'm not gonna go that far. Never mind. Take it back. Take it back.
The River Monsters episode with the Glyphis was really what got me onto that genus in the first place because it's very uncommonly talked about.
Yeah, it's what got me to buy like 60 of their teeth from an Indonesian guy. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, might as well.
Yeah, they're really
Um,
interesting teeth though. The uppers quite superficially resemble great white teeth on a smaller scale.
What do we call Zyphodelamia?
That's
I was
a
just about to bring that up. I don't know. I think they might be a loser.
yeah.
Probably when you only
Like,
have one cutting edge.
yeah, I was gonna say, like we don't ever see that again, right?
No,
Yeah.
At least
we're
That's
not
like,
yet.
we don't do that.
We haven't found anything yet. But if they've had 400 million years to come up with that. If it only happens once and it does poorly, that's a loser.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
they are around in the throughout the Eocene, but the issue is when they start serrating and become larger in size, like Zyphodelamia serrata, shocker, they die out.
Death.
Maybe sooner or later, evolution would realize that serrating isn't the best idea for lamniforms.
Yeah,
Mm-mm. Only for lamniforms, though. Everything else is fine. Just the lamniforms for some stupid reason.
Yeah, the squaliforms seem to do fine. Same with the carcharinids.
yeah, they love being serrated.
Yeah. Serrations don't do so well with the hybridons either.
That's true. I think overall we can consider lamniforms a loser. Just in the grand scheme of things, maybe. I know that's a
They had
hot
their
take
time.
because yeah, they had the Cretaceous. That was their magnum opus. Now they're just
Yeah,
kind of
I don't know. I feel like it could be a gray area. Lamniforms are like a modern day loser, but I think credit has to be given for as long of a run as they had. Like they're still around and they're still, I guess I could call it, they're doing okay. Like just not relative to the other species of sharks, but to dominate the Cretaceous and then you're like hundreds of millions of years after that at this point, or like 100 million years after that at this point, and they're still around, and one of them is like the top shark predator.
Well, that's a thing. Megalodon has reached one of the highest trophic levels known. I don't think we can call that a loser. That's such a large evolutionary feat.
That's true, especially coming from a shark like Cretalamna, where it's like they weren't huge. They were they were like a large shark for their time, but like
Yeah.
relatively, like when you're talking about like a 60-foot long shark, like macro predatory shark, that's I guess credit does have to be given.
Yeah. And it wasn't just the Cretaceous that was their time. They really dominated the Paleogene and Neogene too.
Yeah.
Granted, you had your appearance of Carcharinus and all of that took over some of their niches, but still, as far as the large macro predatory front goes, you have to give that credit with Alamniforms.
Yeah, I'm giving none of the credit to Megalodon and all of the credit to Axolotls. That's where I'm
that's
at.
fair.
The evolution of serrations.
The evolution of serrations, the push down the hill to extinction.
They had a good run, though.
Fine.
They did have a good run. They're one of like them and Squall Corax, I would say, are like the exceptions to that sort of serrations are a death sentence.
Yeah.
I can get behind that. I
Because you
think
could even argue that Megalodon was like going back in the direction of getting much finer serrations. Like the serrations almost seem compared to like Brachiolatus,
that's
like
fair.
the serrations are getting finer and finer as you progress through that lineage. I wonder if they eventually would have like secondarily lost their serrations. Has that happened? Have we seen
That'd be
that?
interesting. Have we? I don't know.
Like the independent evolution of serrations, and then later down a defined lineage, the loss of serrations again, like changing their mind.
I mean, most sharks that we see kind of die before that could happen.
Yeah.
Especially the Lomniforms. They
Like
just
it is interesting to kind of think about because I feel like that's a reasonable hypothesis to like say that Megalodon was going in that direction when you look at the comparison of their serrations. But at the same time, it could sort of be the same story, Paleocarcharodon, where just the original serrations are so ridiculous looking and they just get more refined as they go on. Like they're way more jagged when they evolve the first time, almost every time.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of the Neogene, we should compare it with Hemipristis. And what is my opinion, one of the biggest losers today is Hemiprisus elongata, the snaggletooth shark, because you had this monstrous Hemiprisus sera that could have teeth exceeding 2 inches in length, that had cosmopolitan distribution, and then and then for some reason they wind up becoming much smaller and geographically isolated with the modern day Hemiprisus.
Yeah, I would agree that they're a loser. That like I mean that sounds harsh to say. Like they are one of the losers of the shark world. They are not a loser, but
They
they're one
really
of the,
lost their reign.
yeah, like they and I feel like they could have filled a pretty high like trophic level role if things had like shaken out differently.
Yeah.
Like teeth with that sort of size and shape, like that's a pretty formidable predator. Like if things had gone differently, it could have led to a very different like ecological food web sort of situation in the modern ocean at least. I think I think we could call hammerheads a winner. I think they're so cool. That's my criteria for it. I think they're awesome. And they like when you have such a unique characteristic like the ampullae of Lorenzini that sharks have to evolve, completely maximize that to its potential, where you just give yourself this giant surface area to detect those like impulses. I think that's a really cool evolutionary direction to go. And I think that's a winner.
Yeah. It really is a phenomenal evolutionary feat evolving that. And they also have pretty high diversity too on the species
Mhm.
level.
Yeah. And when do we see the first hammerheads appear?
In the Eocene.
Right? Yeah. I wanted that's what I thought. I didn't want to just make that claim and have it be so far off base, but I thought that was what it was. We're out of the Cretaceous now, so I'm getting shaky again. But I think for anything to last that long with such like a hyper focused body plan, like a such a specific way, like that's not really seen with many other groups in sharks. I
Mhm.
think that that's pretty impressive. Like they went for such a bold body plan. It worked so well that they're still around today. Like it's cool when it works out like that.
Yeah.
Sort of
Though
like the same criteria for like the saw skate shark fish trio.
Mhm.
I can get behind that. The only little caveat I have is that practically every hammerhead is like critically endangered.
Yeah.
Like all of them, but I don't know if there's been enough on the Carolina hammerhead, Sphaerna gilberti. Um, and I think Zygana is also vulnerable, just vulnerable.
Yeah.
So
I think that's another thing. Like other sharks didn't have to deal with us dumping poison into the water and killing because we're afraid. Like
that's true.
it's a tough sort of thing to view it through the lens of like, oh well, this shark couldn't even make it through a mass extinction event. He's a loser. But then like modern day also saying like, well, we're sort of putting a stress on them in such a hyper specific way where it's like we're afraid of this thing that's in the ocean, we'll kill it. Or we are fascinated by it, we're gonna kill it. Like they haven't had to deal with usually predators that are not just killing for food, like
Mhm.
killing for other reasons, which is like that's kind of a stress that doesn't happen throughout geologic time.
Yeah. It is quite a new phenomenon,
Yeah, like with the
especially.
obvious exception of like guarding nests and stuff like that. Like all throughout time, animals have killed each other for threatening their offspring, but like that's very different than what we do. Like,
Mhm.
And it also leaves hammerheads especially vulnerable, I would think, because of their large head shape. I'd imagine it being quite easy for those to be entangled in things like nets,
yes,
Yeah.
like catch.
and especially, I mean, I don't know if there's research to back this up or not, but I would expect that when their whole hunting and like life pattern is dependent on those ampullae of Lorenzini and like how sensitive they are. They're sensitive on regular sharks, let alone one that's evolved like a mattress-sized surface area to put like all those sensory organs on. I think that could be like affected by a lot of things, like a lot of human influences too.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to assume that humans are the biggest losers in the shark world,
Yeah.
honestly, because of how crappy we are. Fair
That's
assumption.
why Heterodontus will reign supreme.
Yeah. Heterodonts will come out of the oceans and kill us all.
One thing that I find pretty cool are the epaulet sharks being able to walk on land.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool.
I think that's a win.
That is a
Yeah,
win.
I would call that a win.
And also with the epaulet sharks, they are currently classified as least concern, which I think is a big W. Because of their
Definitely.
environments, I don't see them being as susceptible to some of the hardships that a lot of the other sharks deal with, with people.
They can just get up and walk away. I mean, they're like, no, I'll leave. Walk off.
But have you seen a video of them walking? It's really cool.
It is really cool. They're like
Yeah,
such
I
a
think
vibe.
it's a cool, like convergently evolved trait too. Like you have a lot of those bottom dwelling fish too, like the bony fish that just prop themselves up on their fins and like move around. Like around here we have like the feathered blenny. We caught one the other day where I work, and they're little things, but like in the bucket we had it, and he's just standing up on his fins and like moving, and then he goes and swims away. And he stands up on his fins. Like if that continues to evolve, like he'll probably be able to just start walking around also. Like all those sort of bottom dwelling sharks that like live on the substrate
Mm-hmm.
and fish too. Like that, it's really cool how they all decide like we're gonna dabble with walking again.
Yeah. Well, are there any other winners or losers that we can think of before we wrap this up?
Not off the top of my head. I think we covered a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I think that this was a great first episode. Thank you, Chase and Kyle. And please, everyone, stay tuned for what's to come because we're going to be making more of these. As usual, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and comment what you think are the biggest winners and losers of the shark world, and whether you disagree with us that Corax is like the king of the shark world.
There's nothing to. It's difficult to disagree with fact.
Chase is gonna
Corax versus
tweet me out.
Heterodontus, who would win?
Corax.
I don't know. I think
Well, I
Heterodontus.
mean,
They
didn't
did win. They
Heterodontus
did
make it
win.
out of the Cretaceous? It's hard
No,
to argue with Heterodontus surviving that extinction versus Corax not.
it
Like,
was a convergent ghost lineage.
Heterodontus
okay,
was really like, oh no, asteroid. But anyways,
yeah, yeah.
Corax actually evolved into the Cenozoic Heterodontus. That's how it works.
urgently.
Yeah, convergence.
Well, on that note, we'll leave you guys. Adios.
All right,
Peace.
yeah.